Questions orales, oral questions.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
WTF.
Here, here.
Hey everyone, quiet down. There's a bulletin on TV.
It's time for a change in this country, my friends. A real change.
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
The one we call Canadians.
But let me ask you, Mr. Prime Minister, will there always be a Canada?
There will always be a Canada.
All right, elbows up. Elbows up.
Hey gang, what's up? Just Aaron right here, Canadian Looney. We have issues in Canada, right? Unless you're completely head in the sand, be aware of this.
Oh, yeah.
And now, oral questions.
Honourable Member for Brandon Souris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to say it is indeed a pleasure and an honour to get up again to speak to Bill C-3, now in its amended form from committee, on behalf of the great constituents of the Wheat City and Western Manitoba. I do find the discussion that has taken place on C-3 since it came back from committee with these amendments fairly startling. You know, we're going to get into a bit of a discussion about what the amendments are that were approved in a multi-partisan fashion at committee. But some of the comments coming from the government side have been alarming in that this was, you know, this bill was required by a court decision, a lower court decision, and so we should just absolutely agree to everything that the courts say. Some members opposite have even commented that Parliament is not supreme in its ability to make laws on the citizenship question, and indeed once a court has made a decision at all. And we know that that's just factually incorrect, Mr. Speaker. In fact, my colleague from Calgary Nose Hill cited Section 9125 in her speech, which does specifically discuss that Parliament has the power within the Constitution of this country to make decisions regarding the provisions of citizenship in this country. So the facts around that are clear. Whether the Liberal government is going to accept them and accept the amendments that were approved at committee remains to be seen. We know that this government has made a lot of comments about being a listening government, about wanting to work together more collaboratively. They're often griping about previous parliaments and the fact that no one wanted to work together with them. Well, we have an opportunity here where two other official parties in this place have come together and moved together some fairly simple, basic, and agreeable amendments to a government bill. And we sincerely hope that the Liberal government is going to approve those as well and move forward this bill in an adequate and appropriate way for Canadians. We know that the national identity of Canada is constantly under threat. We see commentary around all kinds of different ideals about post-nationalism and globalism and what it means to be a Canadian citizen, how being a Canadian and Canada as a whole fits into that context. And I think the biggest concern that I'm hearing from Canadians is the value of Canadian citizenship. And what exactly does that value, what amount of value do we place on being a Canadian citizen in an increasingly interconnected and interrelated world. You know, I certainly think that this bill, in its initial form, was pretty bonkers, is the first word that comes to my mind. I mean, I don't understand the concept of citizenship that goes on and on and on with having, after multiple generations of having no connection to this country, in many cases having barely or never been here, generation after generation. You know, I have family that have moved overseas, from Europe to the South Pacific, and they are having children overseas. And I know that they are going to make sure that those children have a connection to this country because they believe that being Canadian means something. And it's not just words and a piece of paper. It's about a connection to this place, the actual physical space of this country, and the people that call it home and make up our nation as a community of diverse individuals. And if they expect their grandchildren and great-grandchildren to continue to be Canadian and to be Canadians, that they...
Than what the government has proposed. Thank you.
No, member for Brandon Souris in about 35 seconds or less.
Okay, very briefly, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to my colleague from Saskatoon West for the question. Number one, I think it was a mistake not to appeal this court decision at the lower court level when it was rendered. I think there could have been a much better framework and put out than Bill C-3, and unfortunately the Liberals just threw up their hands because they seem to prefer not to make challenging decisions and blame the courts when things don't go their way. We've seen that with other issues, and we're seeing it again with immigration, and so that's the weak way out, but we believe that there is a better path, and my colleagues like him have done an excellent job of putting that forward with these amendments to Bill C-3.
Deuxième débat, reprise de débat, the Honourable Minister of Immigration, Citizenship and Refugees.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise
She's
today
not even French.
to join this debate with respect to C-3.
Remedy the status of people who, were it not for the first generation limit imposed in 2009, would have been Canadian citizens by descent from birth. This is largely a cohort of children who are born after 2009, which means they would be 16 years of age and younger. And it also includes descendants of previously lost Canadians. It also addresses a very small historic cohort who lost citizenship under the outdated provisions of the 1977 Citizenship Act.
During a study at committee, we have proposed and accepted many amendments to Bill C-3. The government examined each of these amendments, and after this examination, we remain convinced that the initial concept behind C-3 encourages transparency in our system and confirms the value of Canadian citizenship.
Set out in the bill for citizenship by descent is straightforward. Once enacted, a Canadian parent born abroad may pass on their citizenship to a child born or adopted abroad only if that parent has at least 1,095 days of physical presence in Canada before the child is born, and that is before the child is born or adopted. Each generation after the first one must demonstrate their connection to Canada. If a parent does not, citizenship stops by descent. Je tiens à préciser que ce projet de loi...
This bill is not intended to create a new way of immigrating to Canada or to allow someone who lives abroad to do so.
Bill, nor does it allow people to pass who are visitors, strangers, to pass on the citoyenneté canadienne in perpetuity. L'objectif est de faire en sorte que les enfants de Canadiennes entretenant un lien fort avec notre...
With a strong tie to Canada, regardless of where they were born.
The connection. For people who move to Canada and seek to become Canadian, we have a clear way to assess whether they have a substantial connection to the country, and that is laid out in the Act, where they have to accumulate 1,095 days in a 5-year period. in order to apply for naturalization. However, citizenship by descent is different. It's not about granting citizenship to someone to join Canada. It's about confirming citizenship at birth based on the parents' connection to Canada. For that reason, the test is different. Le projet de loi repose sur un modèle cumulatif. Pour les parents
For Canadian parents born abroad, this model adds up every day that the parent was living outside of Canada, and this is a way of recognizing a deep connection to the country, even when work or study leads the parent abroad. So take a Canadian child born abroad where the family moves every 2 years for work. That child may have lived for more than a decade in Canada before turning 18 without ever having spent 3 consecutive years in the country during a 5-year period. When that child grows up and wants to have a family abroad or live abroad, with the 3 years in 5, that child would be ineligible for Canadian citizenship.
Whose lives span borders to demonstrate their connection to Canada from birth up until they start a family. It's the fairest and most practical way to uphold the value of Canadian citizenship. Importing the naturalization requirements into citizenship by descent would conflate the two distinct policy purposes and risk excluding the children of Canadians whose lives to Canada were built here over time. So for immigrants to Canada, our naturalization process assesses the readiness to join the Canadian families. It requires establishing a substantial connection to Canada through recent residence, knowledge of the country, capacity in one of our official languages, tests that confirm they're ready to become part of our shared civic life. Citizenship by descent, again, is different. It's not an immigration pathway. It does not confirm membership in Canada on someone new. It recognizes citizenship that existed from birth through a Canadian parent who has a real connection to Canada, either because they were born here or because they met the statutory test of physical presence in Canada. Nous ne demandons pas aux Canadiens nés dans ce pays de passer des tests pour conserver.
To take
desires, Mr. Barrett, I'm going to start with you for 6 minutes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Wernick, when you were clerk of the Privy Council, you oversaw compliance of the Conflict of Interest Act. Would you say that the existing divestiture provisions, including the use of blind trusts, actually prevent conflicts of interest, or in practice, do they or can they fall short?
I think this is probably one of the central questions the committee will want to come to a view on. If you'll just permit me, I saw the conflict of interest regime as one tool in a broader toolbox about democratic governance, and there are a number of tools designed to detect and deter inappropriate points of leverage on our decision makers and keep the trust of Canadians. So very briefly, the Lobbying Act, the rules around campaign donations, the Foreign Agent Registry, security clearances, criminal code provisions. This is all helped by a beneficial ownership registry, a lobbyist registry, and transparency around government contracting and contribution agreements. Parliament created the commissioner model, and it provided for a range of remedies at the discretion of the commissioner, and one of them is a trust arrangement. So I think it's up to you to judge whether it falls short or not. I would keep it in the toolbox.
Would you say that it's effective for people who report to the Prime Minister to be the ones ensuring that the Prime Minister that they report to is not in violation of the Act?
Well, it's ultimately up to the commissioner to make rulings on that.
To make rulings on whether or not the people who report to the Prime Minister should, for example, administer a blind trust?
No, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the arrangements that any prime minister or minister or office holder would make would be discussed with the commissioner, and the commissioner would exercise an opinion on whether they're adequate or not, can request changes, and has remedies available to him or her.
Based on your experience, do you think that that works?
I think that it's going to be tricky when people come into a background, extensive background in the private sector. People come into Parliament, as you know, from many, many different backgrounds, and we want, I think one of the other purposes is to ensure broad and inclusive participation in public office. I would be very careful considering mandatory divestitures because it may end up as a deterrent to people with a private sector background coming into politics. And my view is that we need more people with private sector backgrounds in politics, not fewer.
I guess the issue is that it's a question of public confidence, Canadians being able to trust that the system that's in place is adequately ensuring that there is no conflict of interest. And in the case of an individual entering office, being elected, serving as prime minister, having significant investments, and those investments going into the blind trust, and the ethics commissioner telling us that there's not any really a lot of churn of those investments. They know what's in there. And then the conflict of interest screen is administered by direct reports to the prime minister. And the perception can be and is that there's a conflict, and that a prime minister is continuing to take decisions that further their own financial interest. And there's no reporting to the public on when a conflict of interest screen has been triggered and if it's ever been triggered. And so the higher imperative, I would say, or the leading imperative is that we ensure that Canadians have confidence in public office holders and public institutions, and they don't seem to have that. Would you care to reflect on your time as clerk of the Privy Council? You served a prime minister who was found to have broken the act that we're studying, and twice found guilty of breaking that law. 10 different instances, and that's based on the regime as it currently exists. You must have some suggestions on improvements so that we can avoid a situation where we find a prime minister who is repeatedly breaking this law.
You have a minute, Mr. Warnick. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, I think we should discuss this further because the law is built on language which includes perceived conflict of interest, and I think that's always going to be a challenge because perceived conflict of interest can be very subjective, and somebody's going to have to exercise judgment about what is a perceived conflict and what are the appropriate remedies. Certainly you can change the act to add other provisions, more sanctions, and so on. But I think the problematic part of enforcing the act is that somebody's got to exercise judgment and discretion about perceived conflicts of interest.
In the case of Mr. Trudeau, though, it wasn't a perception; it was that he actually broke the law, and it would seem that
sorry, but you're conflating broke the law with an infraction on a perceived conflict of interest. There are many ways to break the law. Yeah, of course. But there are different remedies. Sure, but there are different remedies and sanctions available to you. Okay. And I think the committee might want to review the the array and the ladder of sanctions available.
Thank you, Mr. Warnick. Thank you, Mr. Barrett. For 5 minutes, Mr. Cooper. Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Warnick, I want to ask you a few questions about the Prime Minister's ethics screen. Would you agree that in terms of seeing that it is triggered, that requires an exercise in judgment that is subjective by those who are responsible for administering the screen?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Well, the onus is on a public office holder to provide information to the commissioner. It happens. It happens.
No,
all the time.
I'm asking you. You earlier spoke about perceived conflicts of interest, and you specifically said that that requires an exercise in judgment on a subjective matter. Now, we have a Prime Minister's ethics screen that states that Mr. Carney may participate in discussions and make decisions affecting 100 free companies on matters that affect the company's interests as a member of a broad class of persons unless those interests are disproportionate to other members of a class. Now, I would note that this language of having a disproportionate interest doesn't come from the Conflict of Interest Act. It's a subjective question. It's a subjective test, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'm totally comfortable that that's a job that Parliament assigns to the Commissioner.
Well, the Parliament did not assign that language. That was something that was incorporated into this screen, and I would note that this language, have you seen this language in an ethics screen before? That specific language of a disproportionality test? I think Parliament has given the Commissioner the mandate to make these judgments about what is the appropriate arrangement. I understand we have an ethics screen in place. I understand the process that led to the ethics screen. I've just asked you a very straightforward question. It should be obvious that, yes, it is a subjective test. Yes, it is a subjective standard. And the fact that you can't even answer that, I find really astounding, and it really raises the question in my mind of whether you're coming here in good faith to answer questions. Now I will ask you this, and I hope you'll agree with this, that when we're talking about the Prime Minister's ethics screen, it's extensive. It's unprecedented. 103 different companies, 103 different conflicts of interest, 103 ethics screen, right?
Sorry, what's the question?
It's pretty extensive, isn't it? Unprecedented.
Yes, it's the most extensive private sector record since Paul Martin.
Well, thank you for providing, for the first time, a straightforward answer to a straightforward question. Now, given the fact that it is an extensive ethics screen, unprecedented, as you've conceded, Canadians have serious concerns about, frankly, the lack of transparency around it, to see that it is triggered when it ought to be triggered. And you served as the clerk of the Privy Council. As clerk of Privy Council, you were pretty busy on a day-to-day basis, were you not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so can you explain to me how it is that this is being left to the clerk of the Privy Council and the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff to administer? How can Canadians have confidence that the screen is being triggered appropriately? Would you agree that there is a legitimate basis for some concern in that regard?
Well, if the committee wants to recommend disclosure of all the instances when the screen was invoked, go for it.
Well, and that's one of the problems that we have, is that right now we have no idea when the screen is invoked or not. One witness came and said that really all we have is hope and trust. Do you think hope and trust is sufficient?
No, I have my faith in the Commissioner.
So your answer is that you're satisfied that hope and trust is sufficient, because that's what we have with this ethics screen.
No, those are your words, Mr. Cooper. I think Parliament has given the job to the Commissioner to make judgments about the appropriate screens and the appropriate sanctions.
Yeah. Well, I certainly don't have a whole lot of trust and confidence that it is being triggered appropriately. Would you support amending the Conflict of Interest Act to provide for an enforceable general anti-avoidance measure so that anyone who circumvents the Act by circumventing a technical loophole would be held accountable?
I mean, that's a question for lawyers. It would have to be linked to whatever the sanctions are for an infraction, but that's used in other laws, and you would. I don't see any problem considering it for this law either.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cooper. Thank you, Mr. Wernick. Mr. Saini, you have 5 minutes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Wernick, for appearing before the committee. Mr. Poilievre, as a leader of the opposition, do you think it's correct that he still does not have a security clearance? And is it ethical for a party leader to reject, keep getting a security clearance?
Well, I don't want to get drawn into partisan crossfire, but I have said publicly that I do think all party leaders of parties recognized in the House of Commons should go through security clearances, largely to do with foreign interference. But in the context that we're talking about today, going through a security clearance will reveal potential points of leverage on someone. It will reveal credit issues, financial issues, personal conduct issues, business contacts, relationships, encounters with the criminal justice system, and so on. So in fact, one of the most practical ways to deal with perceived points of pressure on decision makers is to ensure they've had a security clearance.
Thank you.
Ms. Church, Mr. Barrett, for 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
To follow up on that line of questioning, if there's a potential conflict that's flagged, what's the evaluation process? What does that look like?
I'm not sure about the details. I mean, I think what happens is that items that come in are referred to specific secretariats. It might be economic, social, foreign policy, indigenous affairs, or whatever. And you have an assistant secretary, sort of an ADM level person, sorry for the jargon, and they will be looking at items coming in. Most items arrive, after several rounds of interdepartmental meetings, people from the sponsoring department coming to PCO. So you don't get very many cabinet items that arrive without prior notice, and there is some time for people to take a look at the screens and see if something needs to be actioned.
And who recommends the decision that something not? Let me rephrase. Who makes the recommendation, and to whom would they make the recommendation that the screen be invoked? And so that's something that was going to go before cabinet, not be presented with the affected public office holder being absented from the room, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not. I can't tell you for sure how it's actioned now. I left several years ago. Most cabinet business is done at committees, chaired by other ministers. So my recollection, and I stand to be corrected by people from Privy Council office, is that it would have been the assistant secretary, who's basically the secretary to each cabinet committee, and in the case of full cabinet, it is the clerk.
And so, at the end of my last round, we talked about the effectiveness of having the chief of staff or having the clerk of the Privy Council, who both serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister, responsible for ensuring that that the Act isn't violated. They're the ones that are advising or protecting against this from happening. In the case of Mr. Trudeau, it didn't work. And in the case of Mr. Carney, he's got 103 potential conflicts that are flagged, and we're left with the same system, and it's left in the hands of these individuals. Now, look, they both can be long-serving and well-regarded, but the problem is who their boss is and what their function is to prevent the conflict. And in this case, the risk of a decision being made by the Prime Minister that could further his own financial interests, this goes to the heart of the erosion of confidence that Canadians have in their public institutions. Do you recognize that there is a weakness in this system?
I mean, I think you could tell the story of the last Parliament that all of those issues were detected and made public and became a subject of parliamentary discussion or investigations by the Commissioner. So at some level, the system is drawing out those issues. I don't think you can describe potential issues of perceived conflict in the future in a way that can really be legislated for with a lot of clarity. There's just too much subjectivity.
You mentioned that there's a process in place that prevent the items from ending up on the agenda or flagging them for cabinet committees. So the record keeping and the note taking exists. Should the law require public reporting of when the screen is invoked, it wouldn't require a great lift of the of those involved to report it if that were what the law required.
Yeah, first of all, I mean, the remedy is rarely take the item off the agenda, it's recusal. So if there's a minister in the room that may have a perceived conflict, they'll step out for that item. And
is there a practicality? Is there a pardon the interruption? I just a very short time.
Yep.
Is there a practicality issue when the minister in question is the first minister, and these are like massive concerns or massive issues that are being considered?
Yeah, as I said to a previous question, I have no objection or problem with you writing specific rules for the Prime Minister's office, given that the Prime Minister plays a particular role, in cabinet. And I have no problem with your suggestion, but what I would suggest is that those invocations of the screen be disclosed to the Commissioner. And the Commissioner can come to a view what they want to do about it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wernick. Mr. South.
For your opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here today with a clear proposal. Canada must double business R&D investment by 2030, and here's how we can do it. Now, mind you, this is in order, and it has to be in this order or it doesn't work. Assert our sovereignty, establish venture capital, and be relentlessly competitive. Canada's digital economy is exploding. AI startups, fintech, e-commerce, data centers, and cloud services now drive over $100 billion a year, bigger than agriculture, bigger than forestry. But here's the problem. We have almost no protection for it, no unified law, no shield, and we increasingly and recklessly give our ideas, our IP, and our digital sovereignty away. We spend over $10 billion a year in public research funding, yet only 12% of patents in Canada come from Canadians. Over 87% of our innovation is foreign-owned. Worse, only about 5% of patents generated at Canadian universities ever become licensed, meaning roughly 95% of publicly funded research lies dormant in the valley of death. That translates to a loss of roughly 2.7% of GDP, about $75 billion annually, and $5 billion in tax revenue. In Q1 2025, U.S. startups raised $91.5 billion USD in venture funding. Canadian startups raised only $920 million US dollars, a 100-fold gap. But guess what? Only 20% of that funding was Canadian. You guessed it, U.S. VC firms funded 80% of our Canadian startups. And why does that matter? Well, roughly 0.2% of startups in the U.S. are VC-backed, but VC-backed firms have gone on to constitute about 42% of all U.S. IPOs and 62% of public R&D spending through private firms. And that is why we need to get our sovereignty right. Since 2016, Ottawa, for instance, has invested over $4.4 billion in AI and digital research. Yet roughly 75% of the resulting patents and IP are owned abroad, mostly by U.S. and Chinese companies. That means $3.3 billion of taxpayer-funded innovation is fueling foreign companies, not Canada's. When multiplied by IP's economic effect, that's $15 to $30 billion in lost output every year. We are literally funding the future for someone else, and we need to get back control of it. Meanwhile, 80% of Canada's digital data is owned and hosted on U.S.-controlled servers. Under the U.S. Cloud Act, American authorities can compel access to Canadian data stored on U.S. infrastructure, and this is infrastructure located in Toronto or Montreal, by the way, with no equivalent Canadian blocking statute. If Canada continues to rely on U.S. servers, U.S. venture funding, and U.S. ownership of our innovations, we will enter every future trade agreement as a price taker, not a partner. Increasingly, the next NAFTA will be about AI, data, and digital sovereignty, and right now, we're negotiating from weakness. Meanwhile, our peers treat innovation as a strategic resource. The U.S. uses the CHIPS Acts and DARPA and SBIR to keep IP at home. Israel's Yanza Fund co-invests public capital to anchor startups domestically. This is not about also research, it's also about market structure. We don't have much competition in Canada. We have what's called a monopoly problem. And Canada's most concentrated sectors in banking and digital economy invest less than 0.5% of their revenue in R&D, compared to 2% when there's more competition in the U.S. When markets are closed, innovation dies. Competition itself is an innovation policy. My three core recommendations are as follows. Number one, Enact a Canadian Innovation and Data Sovereignty Act. Protect Canadian IP and data like we protect critical minerals and energy. Require every publicly funded research project to include a Canadian commercialization plan. Require a Canadian data residency for sensitive industries to counter the U.S. Cloud Act. And make sure that right now, when Canadian privacy and data is held on U.S. servers in Canada, that they don't fall under U.S. courts and U.S. jurisdiction. And implement export controls for AI, quantum, biotech, and defense tech. 2, establish a $100 billion sovereign innovation fund, a co-investment vehicle matching private VC 50-50 through repayable loans, not grants. Take small 1% to 2% equity shares in IP-heavy Canadian firms so taxpayers share the upside. And step in when foreign buyers threaten to remove critical Canadian IP, giving founders a Canadian alternative to selling out. And 3, break up monopolies and incentivize competition R&D. Rewrite the Competition Act to make innovation and R&D explicit priorities. Enforce market share caps and require divestitures when there's data when it's less than 40%. And ban killer acquisitions that eliminate Canadian startups. Too many of our Canadian startups get bought up by American VCs. Canada's already proven it can defend sovereignty when it matters. As Jim Basile warned, you can't commercialize what we don't own, and Canada doesn't own much. It's time to act with the same resolve to ensure that when something is vetted in Canada, it's also owned in Canada. Thank you.
We will start with the MP Baldinelli for 6 minutes. Please go ahead. You will have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being with us today. I'm going to begin by going to Mr. Williams. It's good to see you. I know this area has been a passion of yours, and we've spoken many times about it. You've even been a member of this very committee, raising the issues we're studying today, so thank you for that. In some of your other writings on this issue, you've indicated that Canada faces an innovation paradox. You know, we excel at generating ideas but fail to own or commercialize them. Ms. Reynolds, you even said Canada has no shortage of talent or ideas. Yet, you know, we're spending over $10 billion in public research funding, yet economic outcomes increasingly are benefiting others. And you showed that only 12% of patents filed in Canada come from Canadians. Over 87% of innovation is foreign-owned. And I wrote these comments down. You said, we are literally funding the future of someone else. So if Canada's losing about $75 billion a year in GDP from foreign IP ownership, you know, what concrete steps can the government take right now to stop that loss?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, it's a pleasure to be back here at committee. In some ways it's changed, some ways it hasn't changed. But, you know, you're absolutely right. When we studied the first instance of IP commercialization, we identified that a lot of our IP gets siphoned out of Canada, and that's a major problem. Not only is it costing jobs, not only is it costing our GDP, it's stopping us from really utilizing the talents we have in Canada. And number one on that is we have some great world-class institutions here. The U15, you're going to have Robert Asseline come and present at the next panel. But we have unbelievable universities that do some unbelievable research. The problem is we give it all away. So the number one step that we have to do is establish sovereignty in Canada, where we protect the IP that's generated in Canada and ensure that when we spend money, especially $10 billion a year on research, that it doesn't go to other foreign nations. We don't do that we don't allow that with critical minerals. We certainly don't allow that with our energy sector. So why are we allowing it with our data sector? So the number one, what I've said before anything else, and this has to be in order, before we establish VC funding, before that we tackle competition, which I'm always in favor of, number one is to establish our sovereignty, and that's by doing two things. One, it's establishing an act that ensures that when we're spending money in IP, that every attempt possible is to commercialize that IP here in Canada. And number two, the biggest one I brought up was the U.S. Cloud Act in the U.S. So not a lot of Canadians know, not a lot of parliamentarians know that 80% of the data that Canadians utilize, so that's health data, financial data, data in terms of speaking to ChatGPT every day, is held on servers in Canada, but it's owned by the Americans, and they have jurisdiction on that data. In other words, they can be tried under U.S. courts on data held in Toronto on a server because it's held by a U.S. cloud, and that's a problem we have to solve right away. In 1960s, we had what was called the the Helton-Barm Act, or Helms-Barton Act, which when the U.S. were at that time trying to make sure that Canada at that point wasn't allowed to invest in Cuba, we had an act that countered that called the Foreign Extraterritorial Measures Act. And that countered the act so that when, for instance, there were companies that were investing in Cuba, they weren't held under U.S. law. We have to do the same, either to update the Foreign Extraterritorial Measures Act here in Canada or come up with our own legislation that guarantees that Canadian data on U.S. servers doesn't fall under U.S. jurisdiction or under their court system, which is happening right now.
Thank you for that. And what countries are doing it right then? I mean, from retaining IP, protecting data, and scaling innovation. And what can Canada learn from some of these countries? I believe, Ms. Reynolds, you mentioned about Sweden and what they're providing in terms of investment dollars comparison to Canada. Canada ranking, I think, as low as 18 in the OECD. So what is it? What are some of the other countries doing, and what can we utilize or replicate from them?
Well, the U.S. certainly is leading the pack. They're leading the world with some of their biggest companies in innovation, but they're using the CHIPS Act, so that's the newest act. That's to establish primarily their sovereignty when it comes to chips, to try to pull some of that, the microprocessor and chips technology away from Taiwan. Secondly, they have DARPA, and I know that our industry minister in the past has tried to bring forth a CARPA to counter that, but it's really about what it comes down to is procurement. It's that the Canadian government is dedicated to helping companies with their research, but then committing to buying that technology off the shelf from those companies. And we're not doing that. The U.S. has done it for over 30 years with DARPA. And the third thing they're doing in the U.S. is the SBIR, the Small Business Innovation and Research. So they invest primarily in small businesses and their research, and again, committing to commercialize their products or buy their products once they've reached a certain level. And we're not doing any of those here in Canada.
Ms. Reynolds, you had talked about earlier on your third point about retaining value in Canada, about a strategy to...
In French, and I was at your Justice Appearance meeting recently. I was in the back row, and I know that you speak very quickly, so I'm just going to remind you, because of interpretation, we want to make sure that you speak as clearly and just to make sure that the interpretation works. I understand also, Mr. Cooper, that you don't have an opening statement, that you would just like to go to questions, and so we're going to start that. If you're okay, if you do want to say something to committee, I invite you to do that now. But if not, then I'm going to go to Mr. Barrett for 6 minutes.
That works for me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Mr. Barrett, go ahead, please.
Your reporting notes that Brookfield maintained over $3 billion in politically sensitive investments connected to China and its state-linked real estate and energy companies. Can you explain how Prime Minister Carney's role in Brookfield's ties to the regime in China?
Sure, I'll go off memory of my own reporting. Thinking of that story, which I wrote in the lead up to the federal election, I researched into Brookfield's investments in China, and on the real estate file, I noted that after 2015, Brookfield had made very substantial China-based real estate investments, and due to my knowledge of Beijing's United Front networks, I noted that one of the key Hong Kong investors connected to the projects in which Brookfield was investing was part of China's political consultative conference. That was important to me because the Central Intelligence Agency notes that people on that high-level Chinese communist entity are involved, the CIA says, in Beijing's sort of global United Front networks. That's how the Chinese Communist Party brings influential people together. So I noted in my reporting that for Brookfield to get access to that same type of investment project on a major real estate deal in China, together with a very elite Hong Kong real estate tycoon, certainly in my learned opinion, it would take a special kind of access to get that kind of deal. So then tracking forward through when Prime Minister Carney joins Brookfield, in the surrounding years, I noted that the real estate market in China had plummeted. At some point, Brookfield needed to secure some, let's call it sort of a re-injection of capital, and it turned out that it emerged that the Bank of China, as others have reported, was involved in bridging some capital to reinfuse that deal in China's troubled real estate market. So stepping back from that, I noted that people in Mr. Carney's position in Brookfield, Mr. Carney also traveling to China to meet with senior Communist Party officials around the timing of the Bank of China, assisting Brookfield with their real estate investment. That would certainly, in my mind, raise, the questions around access and influence.
Mr. Carney was the chair at Brookfield during that time. Then he enters public office. You talk about his ties, relationships with the regime in China. Is there any evidence to suggest that those ties have been maintained since he's entered elected office?
Well, in my research focusing on Brookfield, which is the nature already in previous testimony, I heard Brookfield and Mr. Carney's 103 potential investment vulnerabilities come up. Look, my work is based on open source investigations, and Mr. Carney, I noted in the timeline back to his days with the Bank of England, had worked on establishing a special relationship between the Bank of England and the Bank of China, and which is, of course, controlled by the Chinese Communist Party in terms of global monetary systems. So I felt that was important as a researcher. Through the years, Mr. Carney, when he joins Brookfield, prior to entering politics, repeatedly travels to Beijing and meets with senior officials, including President Xi Jinping. And I noted that for business persons at that time of Mr. Carney's stature to appear with Xi Jinping, again, as China's economy is in need of foreign investment, and while investments into China are becoming more dangerous in the view of some Western capitalists, having Mr. Carney be in those meetings, I do think is important. And you could say, fairly, is beneficial to Xi Jinping, as it would be beneficial to Mark Carney, the business person, in his time at Brookfield. So when we enter Mr. Carney's race to become the Liberal nominee for Prime Minister, I did note that as the Globe and Mail broke the story that Mr. Carney met with an entity called the Jiangsu Chamber of Commerce in Toronto, I was very aware already that Commerce Department had overt ties to the United Front Work Department, and indeed politically connected Canadians are honorary chairs with that entity. So I do think there's much reporting that hasn't come out on exactly what the Jiangsu Chamber of Commerce is and what Mr. Carney's meeting, which he denied at first, as you know, he denied elements of the Globe and Mail's reporting. So there's controversy around what really happened in that meeting.
Unfortunately, I'm out of time. I appreciate your answers.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Sarré pour 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My questions are for Mr. Williams. I want to thank you for coming here today. Your testimony, as well as all the witnesses, have given us a lot to consider. You made reference of Canada being a valley of death for IP commercialization and Canada facing an innovation paradox. And I was hoping that you might be able to expand on the role Canadian monopolies might play in this.
Thank you. And, I think the main point on this is, yes, so we only have 5% of patents in universities commercialized. That's a low number. And when we talked about where the best practices are that when we've had businesses engaged with universities, with polytechnics, with colleges, we've seen a large, sharp increase in terms of commercialization of that IP. And where I speak on two fronts is one, we need to ensure in legislation that when we're giving public dollars for public research, that we need to make sure that the best intent possible is there to commercialize that IP. But the second side of it is we really, on my third recommendation, we really need to bust what I call Canada's monopoly problem. And specifically, that's in our financial services and our banking sector, that's in our telecommunications sector, and certainly our digital economies. So that when we have, and these are the stats, when there are less monopolies, when we have more competition, then there's more R&D and more attempts for commercializing of IP. And the numbers we gave was 0.5% of revenues right now from these private companies that are monopolies are actually spent in R&D, where in the U.S. it's over 2%. So by ensuring that the third pillar of our strategy is ensuring we bust up monopolies in Canada, in telecoms and financial services and digital services, we are in effect ensuring that R&D goes up. But the second side of it is we need to make sure that the institutions are engaging with businesses. If it, in legislation that there has to be an attempt for commercialization, we will then see businesses engaged with these institutions. And as we've seen in Niagara College, for instance, who's done it almost the best of all colleges in Canada, we're going to see a sharp engagement with R&D, and we're going to see a sharp commercialization of IP.
You're correct. We also have a large college in my area, and they're doing wonders with innovations. And but I noticed that the motion mentions universities and not colleges or polytechnics. Do you think that these other schools can play a role in IP as well? You mentioned the research funding. And what do you think of the follow-up process we do on the research it produces, and how does it compare to the other countries? And is there anything that we can learn from it, and is there room for improvement?
Well, certainly all of that. And yes, I would make that amendment. That should be in there. You know, the reason I put universities is that they do receive about 97% of all the funding. Colleges, when we found our last study, only receive between 2.5 and 3% of all research funding, even though they outperform universities with commercialization. So polytechnics and colleges, I think the recommendation from the IP commercialization study was to increase research funding because they seem to be better at commercializing IP. I would make sure that this is also part of the recommendation, that when we're increasing or seeing that same funding, let's make sure that colleges and polytechnics are getting an increase of funding, because when, and I think that this recommendation would in effect do that if in legislation there is an effect to make sure that we see an attempt for commercialization through public dollars, that you're going to see colleges outperform universities anyways. And if there's a recoil or next budget, I think you're going to see that they're going to get more funding because they actually do that commercialization.
58 seconds. I'll make it a quick one then. I'm aware this committee undertook a study on IP commercialization last Parliament, and so I was wondering if you think the state of Canadian IP has improved at all since this last study.
No, it's gotten worse.
39 seconds.
Okay, and what are the risks of Canada's digital data being hosted on U.S. services?
Well, they are. 80% of Canadians' data is hosted on U.S. servers who are located in Toronto and Montreal. These servers are here in Canada, and then they're under U.S. jurisdiction, meaning a U.S. court can actually go after our data, Canadians' data in Canada. It's very concerning.
It's just a few seconds left, so 7-8 seconds. Okay, so we will now proceed. We will close this panel with MP Jessic for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Johnson, you described how you purchased a Quebec company in order to expand your business and obviously take a good idea, a good product that was coming out of that company. I believe that you were part of the Mars innovation strategy. Could you just describe how that worked for you, and if it made a difference going through Mars to connect all the dots to make your product?
It absolutely did make a difference. And I want to start just saying I fully agree with what Mr. Williams and what Ms. Reynolds said. They're doing a lot to try to create the right playing field. And what I focus on is how do we put a winning team on that playing field. So we work to play to strengths. So one of the things Mars did, we developed an innovative technology with a different type of energy storage system that's very well suited for certain applications. And it's not a one-size-fits-all. It was well designed for the application. Problem is, when you want the City of Toronto to buy this, there's no one else they can bid against. They can't go out and get 3 quotes, for example. So they haven't got the ability to come to us. But what Mars did, which was really innovative, is they worked with the...
To our line of questioning. Madame Dantra, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. As you know, we're looking into something that's gripped the nation in Canada. We have tens of thousands of auto sector jobs on the line here, so I appreciate your presence and your expertise very much. My first questions will be for Mr. Kingston. Of course, you are the President and CEO of the Canadian Vehicles Manufacturers Association, representing GM, Stellantis, and Ford in Canada, correct? Thank you. And so I'm sure you've been following the news, and of course Stellantis recently announced that it's moving production from the Brampton facility to the U.S., along with massive U.S. investments. At the same time, of course, as you know, Stellantis has received hundreds of millions of dollars in funding agreements, and some of that money has already flowed to various plans for retooling, as well as in addition to the $15 billion up to contract with the provincial and federal government for EV battery production. So you're aware of that. So from what we're understanding then, if Stellantis is moving production from the Brampton facility, putting up to 3,000 jobs at risk, it would seem that there was no Canada-wide jobs guarantee in those contracts. Can you comment on that?
So first of all, contracts between the federal government and Stellantis are confidential, as are all contracts negotiated between government and private sector companies. So I cannot comment specifically on any of the covenants in those agreements. But of the commitments that have been made by Stellantis, the overwhelming majority have already been executed. So of the $8 billion committed, about $7 billion has already been executed. So you have a new vehicle, electric vehicle, being built in Windsor. You've got the Nexstar battery plant that's 1,000 jobs, which is now operational. And the announcement with respect to Brampton, there are plans for Brampton. It's not a plant closure.
Right, so thank you for confirming that. So there are plans for the Bramptons that will be waiting on. I guess our concern as well is that from your other comments about the difficulties that the Canada auto sector is facing. In fact, you said Canada's competitiveness as an auto manufacturing jurisdiction is rapidly eroding, and certainly your comments today would signify that there are concerning events on the horizon. We're not through this yet in Canada, and it seems that all of your comments, in fact, would confirm that. So I suppose what we're concerned about is that this may not be the first of the Stellantis job layoffs or other companies. We're deeply concerned. We'll be paying close attention. But I did want to focus a little bit more on that. So the job losses to date that we're aware of at GM, the Oshawa plant was about 700 workers, I believe. GM in Ingersoll, of course, was announced recently. I believe it's about 500 workers lost, 1,200 more uncertain. And, of course, Stellantis, 3,000 uncertain. These investments in the U.S., the tariffs from the U.S. remain, and now you mentioned the sort of the countermeasures that are being applied. It doesn't seem that at the federal level, they're talking a lot about, which is great, the steel and aluminum. We hope to see a deal there, but there doesn't seem to be as much of a primary focus from the federal government on getting an auto sector deal. So if all things remain the same and we don't get an auto sector deal in the coming months, can you give the committee some insight of where you think the auto sector and all the jobs that entails will be in a couple of years if nothing changes, if we don't get a deal?
Yeah, if we don't get an agreement and a removal of tariffs, and if we don't get, importantly, a renewal of CUSMA, because while the 232 tariffs are having an immediate impact now, if you're a company thinking about investing in Canada and you have no certainty regarding the future relationship with the United States, which is what is codified in our CUSMA agreement, it is virtually impossible to make long-term commitments into Canada. So we need a resolution on both items, and we need that to happen rapidly, or it will be very difficult for any new investment in this country, and it will be difficult to maintain existing investment. And frankly, that's not just an automotive story. That applies to virtually every sector of the Canadian economy. We are overwhelmingly dependent on the United States. That will never change. So we have to figure this out, and we have to do it quickly.
I appreciate that. And again, you mentioned it'll be difficult to maintain new investments. So again, concerning events on the horizon for future jobs under your purview and under the purview of others here. And so if if we can't control what's going on with the U.S. and if we're not going to get an auto deal, what can we control in Canada to make us more competitive? Surely there's something locally that's within our sole purview to make Canada a more competitive environment for you to stay here and to expand here in the future. Can you comment on that?
Absolutely. And we've laid out a number of priorities for the government to make Canada more competitive. Look, if you look back in history, when you have a protectionist U.S., fighting protectionism with protectionism doesn't work. We are the smaller partner, and we have to work in a new reality in a more protectionist United States. Think about U.S. tariffs as equivalent to one of the largest corporate tax hikes in American history. That's what it ultimately does, costs borne by Americans, by American companies. So what do you do in response to that as Canada? You can retaliate. You won't win that battle. We've learned that lesson. So your second best option is to make Canada ultra competitive. We should be doing everything possible right now to position this country as the best destination in the world for new auto investment and new investment writ large in every sector of the Canadian economy. So get rid of redundant, damaging regulations like the EV mandate, address interprovincial trade barriers that make it extremely costly and challenging for large companies to operate across this country, and build out a world-class pitch for new automotive investment. We can do that, and we can do that right now, and we can make Canada more cost competitive than the United States for auto manufacturing. So that's what I would propose we do.
I think I only have 5 seconds left. Thank you very much for your input. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Madame Dantro. Madame O'Rourke, 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair Carr. Mr. Kingston, we're all aware of the strength, productivity, and importance of Canada's auto sector. As you've said, it's more than 100,000 direct jobs, 500,000 indirect jobs. City of Guelph is home to Linamar, Denso, Magna, and that alone is more than 12,000 jobs. So it makes us one of Canada's most vulnerable cities to U.S. tariffs. So I'm acutely aware of the challenges in the auto sector and its importance. You just mentioned that we should build out a world-class pitch, and I'm wondering, in the last several years, we've had extraordinary investments by Volkswagen, significant investments by Stellantis. And so we know what the strength is of our sector. We know how qualified our auto workers are, how effective our plants are, because that's what's attracting that foreign direct investment. That's what's attracting new lines to Canadian factories. And so I'm wondering if you could help us understand a bit of the history on what was working so well pre-January 2025, and to what you would squarely attribute the industry's current challenges.
Thank you. It's a great question, and I think sometimes, given all the uncertainty in the sector right now, we forget about the success of the past 5 years. $40 billion plus in new investment into the Canadian automotive industry, and a large reason for that was because President Biden introduced the Inflation Reduction Act, which had measures that were explicitly aimed at taking components of the automotive supply chain from Canada, from other countries, and putting them into the United States. The federal government reacted aggressively and reacted quickly to put forward matching programs to ensure that we maintained our footprint. And we saw a huge reinvestment in the sector, historically large. So that was working. The plan was working, and it was linked, of course, to our critical mineral production and supply chain. What changed is that we now have a U.S. administration that is doubling down on some of those protectionist measures and is intent on securing more investment in the United States.
Certainly. Mr. Adams or Mr. Williams, would you care to expand on that description of what was the real strength? What remains the real strength of the sector? Because our auto workers are going to work every day and assembling world-class vehicles and making world-class parts. What's really led us to today?
I'll just make one comment to say, yep, David, if I could. So one of the things I'd flag for committee members is this organization named CAPSI, which is the Canadian Automotive Partnership Council. So it is a industry partnership between the federal government, the Ontario government, and the Quebec government, which has for 25 years focused on getting investment into the country. It has all the CEOs of all the Canadian-made manufacturers sit as members of that. The parts makers, CEOs, the car dealers are there. We've had a long long history of supporting investment here in Canada on the dealer side of the equation. That was started as, a bipartisan, the late Jim Flaherty, when he was minister in Ontario with Alan Rock at the time. And I think that's been a success model, but we really need to have that CAPSI on steroids, if you will. It has to do more and has to do faster when we're under fire from the U.S. administration. David, over to you.
Yeah, I think I would just maybe add to that. It's mentioned in terms of CAPSI is a great entity, but I think the reality is it's got vested interest companies around the table. And I think what I was suggesting in my comments was having some outside expertise, really take a good hard look at the automotive industry as quickly as we can and set up the plan that Mr. Kingston referred to in terms of trying to figure out how we can market that plan.
All right, gang. So we're going to drop right into it. Hi, my name's Aaron. This is Canadian Looney. We have some politicians, like we've been doing this for a couple of years now. So we've kind of figured out who the good guys are and the bad guys, like the liars, the whatever. I used to play a lot of cards. So I like to think that I know how somebody is thinking just by their, like their body language, whatever. Anyhow, here's one guy we really like. Here we go.
I think we need to have a conversation about liberal racism. I was thinking about this over the weekend because we had this awesome event in Bowmanville called Apple Fest. And it's a great time. People coming together, they're eating apple fritters and apple muffins. And while that's going on, I got confronted by one of the local hardcore liberal partisans. When I say that, I don't mean somebody who just votes for the Liberal Party. No, I mean like one of those like hardcore dudes who was with Justin Trudeau until the very end, So he comes up to me and like wants to start this argument about DEI. And so I'm like, cool, like let's have a conversation. But instead of it just being a conversation, he really just wanted to like prove he was smarter than me. And like make me feel bad, like drag me down, right? Like tell me that I don't understand and that, make me feel like I'm very uneducated compared to him. And while that's going on, there's another hardcore liberal partisan in the area running around attacking my intellect, like he's so much smarter than I am. And this has been like months of this kind of vibe from these like hardcore liberals, like they're ran a whole campaign in our community trying to convince people in our area that I'm incapable of having independent thoughts, that I can't have my own beliefs, but rather I'm somehow less than them, that they know more than me and I can never be equal to them. And it's like kind of disturbing, to be honest. Like it's been like months of this and it's starting to feel like phrenology type stuff, like Leonardo DiCaprio in Django Unchained. Like these guys want to bring out some 19th century instrument to measure the size of my skull. It's weird, right? And these guys should know better than to have this way of treating people. One of them is a counselor in Clarington, another one a former school principal, and yet they feel so entitled to like talk down and like demean people, right? Who think differently than them. Like they think they know how a member of a minority community should feel. And if you don't say what they think, then somehow they feel like they can police you and tell you what you're supposed to think. It's odd stuff. And you kind of mix that with the fact that these guys are like enthusiastic supporters of DEI. Oh, they can't get enough of DEI. And it makes you wonder, like, why are they so keen to advance policies that assume the inferiority of others? Because that's kind of what DEI is, right? It's this idea that people from minority communities can't get ahead, can't succeed without liberals extending this unique special treatment and unique generosity to us. I find it disrespectful. Disrespectful to me, disrespectful to people who look like my father, my family, some of my neighbors, some of the people I go to church with. It's this very paternalistic attitude that we need the liberals to give us these special benefits and these special things as if we can't compete and do well based on our own talents and abilities. Now, I understand there may be people in minority communities who like this DEI stuff. There may be people in minority communities who like these liberal policies. But there are a lot of us who don't, and I'm one of them. I don't like it. I don't like feeling like other people get to look down on me and extend pity to me as if I'm less capable than they are. I don't like that. And in fact, I believe that a lot of people in minority communities just want an economy that creates opportunity. For those of us who are hustlers and strivers and dreamers and builders, we just want to see the fruits of our labor. And I think that's what's gone wrong in Canada right now, is that we're not able to see the fruits of our labor. None of us, regardless of what you look like. And we don't have an economy that is giving the right opportunities to those who are willing to work hard for them. So to me, this is what liberal racism is. It's this idea that they get to put you down, they get to demean you, they get to tell you that you're less than them, but then also tell you that they're your savior, that liberal DEI policies are going to be what gets you ahead in life. I think we have to reject liberal racism. And I'm very comfortable saying I don't support liberal racism. And as the Member of Parliament for Bowmanville, Oshawa North, I will stand up against it unapologetically. Shout out to the wonderful people in Clarington and Oshawa. Appreciate you very much. Let's restore the North. Let's restore the promise of Canada. I find it outrageous, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm just being real.
So evidently you guys stand for a lot of things. There's the criminal justice stuff, there's the freedom of speech stuff, which is all great. But I think the core of the Conservative Party is the economic policies. So I've got two questions for you guys. First, looking at your platforms, a common theme is reducing the role of government and increasing the role of for-profit organizations. Profit can only be increased relative to revenue by either paying workers less or charging customers more. As workers and customers, why should we vote for people giving more money and power to for-profit organizations, the same billionaires and mega corporations price gouging our rent and groceries? It's common sense not to trust the federal government, but why not instead subsidize not-for-profits or municipal-level government programs? Second question, less important than the first question. Another common theme in your platforms is the culture war, fighting against woke and DEI. The rising cost of living shows that the real divide in Canada is between people charging prices and the people paying prices. In the light of these serious economic problems, why are you keeping people divided for gender identity and skin color?
So I'm going to answer your second question first, because I find it outrageous, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm just being real. The people promoting DEI are the ones dividing us based on skin color. And the people who want opportunity distributed fairly and public services distributed fairly, regardless of what you look like or where you come from, those are the people seeking to bring us together. I would ask you very humbly, since you seem to have a problem with big corporations, why do you think Rogers and Bell advertise their DEI policies while charging Canadian consumers some of the highest cell phone bills in the entire world? Why do the big banks, who seem to do just fine in our economy despite the youth unemployment rate continuing to rise, promote DEI policies? Do you believe it's because they have a genuine interest in making things fair or easier for the average Canadian consumer? Or is it because it's a way to virtue signal and make it look like they care about the average person when they're really actually putting forward policies and a way of doing business that makes life harder and harder for the average person? So I would say with great confidence, that in pushing back against DEI, we are actually increasing the likelihood that all people are treated fairly, that people can come together, and that we might hold those powerful corporations you're concerned about accountable for what they're actually putting people through, which is a cost of living crisis. And we have been the party to push back against oligopolies more than anyone else in Ottawa, whether it's through groceries, banking, telecommunications. We believe the average Canadian consumer deserves more choice and that we will benefit from more competition. And that's what you get when you emphasize the role of the private sector in our economy.
All right, guys, I love Jamil Giovanni, like he is one of my favorites. But we're crossing over to question period now, so we're going to check that out.
Private Leslie McGregor and Flying Officer Howard Weaver. Those that served but returned home, Corporal Margaret Ruth Ellis in the RCAF Women's Division and Sergeant Major William Alexander Spears of the Perth Regiment. More recent veterans, Warrant Officer Alan Johnson of the RCR with tours in Kosovo and Afghanistan, and Chief Warrant Officer Chris Paulu from the Gray and Simcoe Foresters with tours in Croatia, Sierra Leone, and Afghanistan. Our veterans are incredible men and women who have served our country and deserve to be remembered for their sacrifices and contributions to Canada. Pro Patria, unless we forget.
The honourable member for Vancouver Quadra.
I have a lot to celebrate this year, but my family came together in mourning over this summer. My 91-year-old uncle, Gordon Grant, passed away, who was the oldest member of our family, and he comes from a unique background. My grandfather, Hong Tim Hing, immigrated from China. My grandmother, Agnes Grant, was a Musqueam member, and he was the first mixed Chinese Musqueam person in our community. At the age of 20 years old, he became the father to my dad because their father passed away, who I never got to meet. And he's a man I know I firmly stand on his shoulders today. I wouldn't be who I am today without his strong will, his strong determination, and being able to raise 5 children of his own. He allowed me to be proud to be a Canadian of Chinese ancestry. He allowed me to be proud to be a Canadian of Musqueam ancestry, and he allowed me to be proud to be a Canadian. So we would all be better off with much more Uncle Gordys in this country.
The honourable member for Terra Nova, the Peninsulas.
Mr. Speaker, whether it's the farmers struggling with the canola trade, steel companies facing tariffs, or auto workers losing 3,000 jobs to the USA, it seems like all these Liberals are doing is helping Trump build the wall on trade barriers. But these Liberals never mention the trade barriers that on our sealing industry in Newfoundland and Labrador. Seal overpopulation in Atlantic Canada is killing our ecosystem. According to the DFO, the sustainable harvest amount is 250,000, yet only 30,000 are being killed each year. Here are the facts. Each seal are eating 11 pounds per day. Collectively, they eat 9.7 billion pounds per year. The entire Atlantic fishery only lands less than 2.5 billion pounds. We need to restore balance in our ecosystem. We need to feed Canadians. We need a Prime Minister who will remove this global trade barriers for seal harvesters in our country.
The Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, at the occasion of Women's Month, I would like to pay tribute to the extraordinary and often silent contribution of an exceptional woman. Born during the Second World War, she raised her 7 children while working every day on the family farm in the lower St. Lawrence region alongside her husband. Despite demanding and exhausting days, she found the strength and courage to serve on the board of directors of a large insurance company for more than 26 years, from 1986 to 2012. I need not remind you that at that time, women on the boards of large corporations could be counted on the fingers of one hand, and it's only recently that her children fully realized that with remarkable discretion but unwavering determination, their mother had helped advance the place of women in an egalitarian society. This woman's name is Huguette Veilleux. Mother, I'm proud to be your son.
The honourable member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
Lately, there's been a lot of terse words said about Canadian-American relations, so today I'd like to try something a little different. For generations, Canada and the U.S. have shared the world's longest undefended border, fought together on the battlefield against evil, maintained strong trade ties, and joined our nations through marriages like mine. The peace, freedom, and prosperity we have shared has helped to bring stability to the world. To continue, we must each safeguard our economies and societies through smart policies, strong militaries, robust protections for our democratic institutions, and frankly, by seeking to understand the complexities that each of our nations face in our hopes and challenges. So I'll do my part by saying to Master Sergeant Jeffrey Scott Garner Sr., I love you, my husband, a proud American to the core. Thank you for loving me as I stand for my people while also providing me with important perspectives about your nation. May we all continue to strive for prosperity and peace between our nations. The free world is counting on us to get it right.
The honourable member for Sydney Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to recognize Colton Ellis of River Denny, Cape Breton. Recently, Colton made his NHL debut with the Buffalo Sabres, where he turned aside 26 shots, earned his first NHL win, and was named the first star of the game in Buffalo's 4-2 victory over the Red Wings. Colton's rise from Cape Breton local rinks to the NHL speaks to his incredible determination and incredible talent, and to the community that's been there behind him day one. He's showing young athletes across Cape Breton anything is possible. So on behalf of all Cape Breton fans, I extend a heartfelt congratulations to Colton and his family. We're proud of you, and we'll be cheering for you every step of the way.
The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Aides-Chemins, Lévis. Mr. Speaker, at the occasion of the 125th anniversary of the Desjardins Group, it's an honor for me, as a resident of Lévis, to pay tribute to Alphonse and Dorimène Desjardins, founders of what would become the largest cooperative financial group in North America and one of the largest private employers in Quebec. The first credit union, the Caisse de Lévis, was established in December 1900, and it was there that 132 people signed the founding social pact. Since then, Quebecers' attachment to this institution has never wavered. With some 7 million members and a presence in every region, Desjardins is now a key player in Quebec's economic development and also an important player elsewhere in Canada and beyond our borders. I would like to pay tribute to the vision of Alphonse and Dorimène, their enduring values of justice and solidarity, and all the employees who over the decades have made Desjardins a cooperative that inspires immense pride. I also salute Mr. Denis Dubois, President and Chief Executive Officer of Desjardins Group, who is currently in Ottawa. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Mirabel. Mr. Speaker, this year we're celebrating the 125 years of a true source of pride for Quebecers, namely the Desjardins Group. Founded in Lévis in 1900 by Alphonse Desjardins, it was the Quiet Revolution before the Quiet Revolution. At that time, when English-speaking banks were turning their backs on French Canadians and loans were wreaking havoc that were usurious, Alphonse Desjardins drew inspiration from the European cooperative model to create a credit union by and for the people. Over the years, credit unions have enabled our people, farmers and workers to access credit, in addition to participating in the birth and growth of several local flagships, such as Seco, Vachon, Cascade, and Cirque du Soleil, of course. Today, Desjardins is deeply rooted in our regions, villages, and towns. It's a symbol of collective determination and success that reflects the entrepreneurial spirit of Quebecers. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Bloc, I invite this House to join me in wishing the Desjardins movement a wonderful 125th anniversary. I raise my glass to their anniversary and to another 125 years at least, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Longueuil-Saint-Hubert. Mr. Speaker, on October 17th, the 27th edition of La Nuit des Sans-Abris in Longueuil was held under the theme of Solidarity for Greater Dignity. Organized by the Table Itinérance Rive-Sud, this annual event brings together citizens, organizations, and institutions to raise awareness about the reality of homelessness, break down prejudices, and promote solidarity. I would like to commend the exceptional work of the volunteers, community partners, and individuals. And I'd also like to thank the people who shared courageously and humanly their experiences. Their commitment reminds us that no one should be left without a roof over their head. Homelessness is not inevitable, but it requires compassion, collaboration, and action. Together, let us build communities where everyone can live with dignity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Crowfoot.
Mr. Speaker, after 10 years of this Liberal government, Canada has gone from having, quote, the world's most prosperous middle class, unquote, to a country of empty bank accounts, empty refrigerators, and unaffordable homes. That's why Conservatives demand an affordable budget, one that cuts the hidden taxes on food like the industrial carbon tax, plastics ban, and fuel regulations, one that cuts taxes on work, housing construction, investment, energy like income taxes and capital gains tax, and that stops the inflation tax, the cruelest tax of all, Mr. Speaker, by keeping the deficit under Justin Trudeau's staggering $42.7 billion and by reining in its out-of-control spending on bureaucracy, outside consultants, false asylum claimants, and especially on corporate welfare. This government has chased $500 billion investment dollars out of Canada and has taken Canada to the bottom of the G7 and the OECD in per capita growth. That's why Conservatives demand that the budget contain a complete reversal of the lost Liberal decade and one that puts Canadians first.
Pierre. The honourable member for Guelph.
Speaker, visiting Ottawa today are two remarkable individuals who founded the University of Guelph's Serving Scholars Program, Dr. John Walsh and Lieutenant Darren Sargent of Guelph's 11th Field Regiment. For 8 years, Serving Scholars has provided academic accommodations and experiential learning opportunities while fostering a campus culture that values military service. It enables Canadian Armed Forces members to stay in the Reserve Force, grow professionally, and gain knowledge that strengthens both their military careers and their academic success. Serving Scholars reminds us of a simple truth. Those who wear the uniform can also wear the cap and gown, because those who serve our nation deserve every chance to succeed in the classroom. On behalf of the Parliament of Canada, I thank Dr. Walsh and newly promoted Lieutenant Sargent and all past and current students who have served and studied through the Serving Scholars Program. Your dedication to Canada in uniform and in the classroom and in the community makes us very proud. Thank you for your service. Merci pour votre service.
Thank you for your service.
The honourable member for Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, affordability in Waterloo Region has never been worse. Since 2019, monthly visits to Canada's food banks have more than doubled. In Waterloo Region alone, 1 in 8 families are currently accessing food assistance programs just to feed their families, while they're spending $13.50 a month on groceries alone, all while housing rising is increasing. Yet the Liberal government has failed to deliver. Promises were made, but the supports have never come. Let me quote the Prime Minister. "We will need to do things thought impossible at speeds we haven't seen in generations." This was during the election. Let me quote him now. "It's going to take some sacrifices, and it's going to take some time." Canadians have sacrificed enough. We need leadership that listens, acts, and empowers. It's time to stop rewarding delay and start demanding results. Because in Waterloo Region, unaffordability isn't just a talking point, it's real.
The honour for Ottawa Vanier Gloucester.
Mr. Speaker, I pay tribute to a remarkable citizen who worked here in the House of Commons as a stenographer, Mr. Alphonse Desjardins. It was while attending House debates that Mr. Desjardins became aware of the problem of access to credit, and he undertook extensive research on a cooperative model. Through his research and interactions with several European cooperators, he adapted this model to the Canadian context and created the first credit union. Over the past 125 years, the Desjardins Group has become the largest financial cooperative in North America, and we owe a debt of gratitude to Alphonse and Dorimène Desjardins, who left us this indispensable movement. Desjardins stands out in North America for its financial strength, high capitalization, and unwavering commitment to its 7.8 million members and clients across the country. I would also like to welcome Mr. Denis Dubois, the new President and Chief Executive Officer of Desjardins Group, and I wish you another 125 years of building the future.
The honourable member for Long Range Mountain.
Speaker, more than 2 million visits were made to food banks in March. Twice as many Canadians needing help to eat than in 2019. In a nation as rich in resources as we are, this is unacceptable. Nearly 1 in 5 people who turn to a food bank are employed. They go to work every day and they still can't afford groceries. 1/3 are children. Seniors are showing up in record numbers. Food banks are doing everything they can, but they're being pushed beyond their limits. They're spending more than twice they did just a few years ago to keep shelves stocked. Recent reporting shows grocery prices in Newfoundland and Labrador rose about 4% last year. That may sound small, but for families already stretched thin, it means they go without.
That's right.
In Stephenville, Catherine told my office she buys only what's on sale. Fresh fruit is a luxury. She grows vegetables so she can eat. She does everything right and still falls behind every month. The time for action is now. Canadians deserve more than excuses.
The honourable member for Scarborough-Agincourt.
October is Women's History Month, and it's not over
over yet. Join me in celebrating all the amazing women and girls across the country, women past and present who have made groundbreaking discoveries in medicine, pioneered innovations in AI, championed in public service, and so much more. On this side of the House, we invest in women's prosperity. We have contributed $7 billion through the Women's Entrepreneurship Strategy to support over 400,000 women in launching and scaling up their business. On this side of the House, we invest in women's safety. We contributed over $539 million through the National Action Plan to end gender-based violence, to better protect women and end the cycle of violence. And on this side of the House, we invest in women's leadership. Women make up 40% of our Liberal team in Parliament, and we have the largest women's caucus in Canadian history. We know that when we invest in women, Canada thrives.
Bravo!
Oral questions, questions orales, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Banque Alimentaire Canada.
Food Banks Canada has published its report on 2025, their final report, and they report 100% increase in the number of people needing food bank assistance since the Liberals took power. Last year, 39% experienced food insecurity, 53% skipped meals, 34% spent a whole day without eating, and 82% of households were not able to get enough food because of the Liberals' inflationist prices. How many more meals are Canadians going to miss because of this Prime Minister's upcoming budget? The Honourable Government House Leader. Food Banks Canada reports on 4 main factors to help solve the hunger problem in Canada. It's a lasting problem, and it requires a huge battle to overcome. There are people with disabilities, there's health, there's dental care, there's food school programs, and the National Housing Strategy. Those are all programs that they voted against that will help. And they've voted against every initiative we've undertaken to support the disadvantaged. The Honourable Opposition Leader. Food Banks Canada, I'll paraphrase what they said, that it took decades to get 1 million people in the lineup for a food bank, but only 5 years to get up to 2 million clients in the lineup. So after 10 years of Liberal rule, there are now 700,000 children using food banks. The Liberal programs just feed bureaucracy, not children. Are they going to force Canadians to sacrifice even more now? The Honourable Secretary of State for Children and Youth. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that Canadians are dealing with challenges, and that's why the government is investing in Canadian families to help them get ahead. Thanks to the school food program, which we are making permanent, we will alleviate some of the pressures on Canadian families, also through dental care, our child care program, and the Canada Child Benefit. These are essential measures to ease the pressure on Canadian families. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Released its report today, Hunger Count 2025. Showing the number of Canadians relying on a food bank has more than doubled since this Liberal government took office. It shows that 39% of the population experienced food insecurity, 82% did not have enough to eat, 34% went an entire day without eating, 53% missed a meal to afford something else, 28% went hungry at least once a week. Now the Prime Minister says Canadians will have to make even more sacrifices. How many meals will Canadians have to sacrifice for yet another costly Liberal budget?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is good at throwing all of this stuff out. What he's not good at is reading what the groups on the ground actually have to say. Of course there are too many people living in poverty in Canada, but there are significant initiatives being put in place by this government, opposed by this Leader of the Opposition and his party, systematically evoked in the report from Food Banks Canada today, Mr. Speaker. We support these key assistance programs for Canadians. He votes against them and then dares to get up and criticize us for putting in place support for the weakest Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, their programs do not feed kids. They feed bureaucracy, consultants, lobbyists, and Liberal insiders. And if you want to question that, 700,000 kids are lined up at food banks every single month. And let me quote from the report. It took decades to reach 1 million visits in any month, and it has now taken half a decade to more than double that. These are not outliers. This is Canada's new normal. The more government spends, the more things cost. How many meals will Canadian kids have to sacrifice for yet another costly Liberal budget?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Children and Youth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In fact, Canada's largest food bank in Toronto, the Daily Bread Food Bank, is asking that the National School Food Program be made permanent through legislation. And we are delivering this. They are asking because the program helps provide nutritious meals to 400,000 children at school. The Conservative Party voted against this. The members opposite will soon have an opportunity to do the right thing for their constituents and make school food permanent. We urge them to do so.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, these Liberal programs feed bureaucracy, lobbyists, consultants, and insiders, but they don't feed kids. Yep. Children cannot eat Liberal press releases or Liberal photo ops. Mothers cannot fill shopping carts with Liberal boasting. Canadians need food, and right now, after 10 years of this Liberal government, there's now 2.2 million Canadians lined up at food banks. 700,000 of them are kids, and a third are in families where they work, but their paychecks are vaporized by Liberal taxes and inflation. How many meals will Canadians have to sacrifice for the next costly Liberal?
The Honourable Minister of Housing and Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, the Leader of the Opposition seems to flat out ignore the fact that this government is focused on affordability. We are focused on affordable housing, which the reports outline as a critical driver for affordable food. We are taking action, Mr. Speaker. We look at the trajectory we are on right now. Mortgage rates are coming down. Average rents are coming down, according to the Parliamentary Budget Office. We're seeing progress, but we're not stopping there, Mr. Speaker. Build Canada homes will be in this budget, $13 billion that this opposition can vote for affordable housing in.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Your focus is affordability? Mr. Speaker, here are the facts from the Hunger Count report. 78% of food banks had to buy more food than normal because they were running out and not collecting enough donations. 1/4 of food banks actually ran out of food while there are still people lined up waiting for something to eat. Wow. We now have nearly a third of Canadians who go hungry at least once a week. This sounds like something out of a Great Depression, and the Prime Minister has the audacity to say Canadians should sacrifice even more. How many meals will his costly budget force Canadians to sacrifice?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Family.
Mr. Speaker, I take it by the question of the Leader of the Official Opposition that he will support Budget 2025, where we make the school food program permanent, where we double down on jobs for young Canadians, where we invest in skills training for the skilled trades professionals of the future. Mr. Speaker, I just announced that in the budget, personal support workers will receive a tax credit of $1,100 a year. Mr. Speaker, we are putting money and support in the hands of Canadians, and that's why they trust us, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, the Honourable Member for Saint Jean. Mr. Speaker, just this past weekend, the government blamed the opposition, complaining that there was a lack of support to get the budget passed. But just a friendly reminder, the people elected a minority government. That means the people wanted the government to work with the opposition to come to agreements. The government can come to agreements with the Conservatives or with us or with independent members. So instead of complaining and threatening elections, when are they going to get down to work? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, of all the criticisms you could make about this government not working, I think not getting down to work is one of the furthest fetched criticisms. Now, there are 44 Quebec members elected on this side of the House who are working pretty darn hard, Mr. Speaker, for their communities and for people in their ridings and to meet the real needs out there in Quebec. The Bloc, it seems to me, is a bit slow to realize this with their 22 members. Yes, the Bloc is a minority. The Honourable Member for Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals don't even know what it means to work together for the common good. What they're saying is vote for our budget even though we have completely ignored Quebecers' needs. And then they're surprised when we tell them they need to get back to work. We're 1 week before November 4th. The Liberals are well aware of our demands around healthcare, seniors, housing, access to home ownership, infrastructure, and the reimbursement of the $800 million stolen from Quebecers. The real question is, do they want our support? The Honourable Minister of Diversity and Canadian Culture. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I think I'll call for your assistance because we're having a lot of trouble understanding the Bloc's position. There was a meeting between the Prime Minister and the Bloc and the House Leader and the Finance Minister and myself, and they presented all their demands, and now they're saying they're not going to vote for the budget. So are they willing to negotiate? If so, we are too. But if they're not willing, you can't sit in the middle of two chairs like that. You can't have your cake and eat it too. The Honourable Member for Mirabel. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals met with party leaders about the budget when the budget had already been written. They didn't talk to Quebecers either. There were no pre-budget consultations. No witnesses were heard in committee. After a year and a half without a budget, the Liberals worked on their own without even meeting a single stakeholder from Quebec's socioeconomic communities. And then they're surprised when we tell them they're not meeting the needs of Quebecers. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals know what they need to do to get our support. The real question is, do they really want their budget to pass? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, Canadians elected a new government 6 months ago. A government with a mandate to undertake major projects in Quebec and outside Quebec to work on the needs of our communities and to move ahead with projects that will create opportunities for our young people all across Quebec and Canada. Mr. Speaker, the question is, will the Bloc trigger an election at Christmas in 2025? Yes or no?
Member for Thornhill.
The Daily Bread Food Bank and the North York Food Bank in Toronto just released their annual report. It's called Who's Hungry? And it seems like the answer to that question is nearly everyone. 2.2 million visits in a single month. It took decades to hit 1 million and only half a decade under these Liberals to double it to more than 2 million. They found that 82% of households report they didn't have enough food to eat in this year. The majority said it was because of the cost of living. Every dollar that the government spends simply drives up food prices. It's over 4 million visits in Toronto. How many more people do they want visiting next year?
Yeah, way to go.
The Honourable Secretary of State for Seniors.
Mr. Speaker, this government has taken and continues to take real action that supports the people of Canada. We have instituted the National Food Program. We have instituted the Canadian Dental Care Program. We have instituted a number of things that help Canadians, whereas the Conservatives can't be trusted to help anyone. They use this as a speaking point instead of really caring about Canadians and whether or not they have the resources they need. These programs help seniors. They help seniors across the country and ensure that they have what they need to retire with dignity, where the Conservatives push the retirement age higher.
The honourable member for Thornhill.
Speaker, if any one of those programs worked, there wouldn't be over 700,000 kids in line at a food bank. Make food cheaper. Instead, they doubled the deficit and they sent food bank usage up 360% in 5 years in Toronto. Students make up a quarter of those visits to food bank. And just last week, the Prime Minister lectured them all about making sacrifices. Well, they've already sacrificed home ownership. They've sacrificed good-paying jobs. And now he's asking them to sacrifice food. What will it take for the Prime Minister to make them, or what sacrifices will they need to make to stop this Prime Minister from his out-of-control spending?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Children and Youth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The report invoked also clearly states that to tackle these challenges, we need to strengthen supports to families. It specifically mentions delivering school food, dental care, childcare, and affordable housing at scale. Conservative MPs have voted against each of these measures. In fact, Conservative MP for Central Newfoundland called the National School Food Program garbage, even though it's already feeding 4,000 kids in his home province. We are focused on solutions and on delivering for Canadian families.
Honourable member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington, Tyendinaga.
Food banks were meant for emergencies, not everyday survival. Yet more Canadians rely on them each month just to eat. Families are working harder but falling further behind as groceries soar and paychecks shrink. This isn't about generosity, Mr. Speaker. It's about failure. As Food Banks Canada CEO Kristen Beardsley warns, there were 2.2 million food bank visits in a single month. The longer they ignore the reality on the ground, the deeper the crisis becomes. Mr. Speaker, when will this Liberal government realize their inflationary deficits are driving Canadians to the food bank?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Mr. Speaker, I assume the Member of Parliament opposite was listening to my colleague when she was quoting Canada Food Banks about what needs to happen next, which is making the school nutrition program permanent, Mr. Speaker, investing in affordable houses, Mr. Speaker, ensuring that people have the supports that they need to live a comfortable life, Mr. Speaker, including affordable child care and dental care. And, Mr. Speaker, that's what we're going to do, and we sure hope they don't vote against Canadians again.
The Honourable Member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington, Tyendinaga.
We keep sounding the alarm, but it feels like no one on that side is listening, Mr. Speaker. Families are stretched thin and communities are breaking under the weight of rising costs. One food bank executive said it plainly: housing and food costs are the greatest contributors to the increase in our services. Costs for basic living continues to rise while the money coming in does not. When will this government finally hear the voices of Canadians and stop letting hidden taxes, packaging taxes, and the industrial carbon tax drive families to the food bank?
The Honourable Minister of Housing and Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, well, again, the member opposite did connect the dots between housing costs and food costs, and that's why this government is so laser-focused on affordable housing. And we are seeing action on this. We're seeing progress to date. We've seen average rents come down across Canada. We're seeing mortgage rates come down. We're seeing home prices come down to make life more affordable. We're cutting taxes for 22 million Canadians and first-time home buyers. All of those measures are delivering results, and we aren't stopping there, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Quebec-Mactaquac.
Mr. Speaker, Food Banks Canada reports 2.2 million visits in a single month, double what it was just 6 years ago. Their CEO says poverty and hunger have become the new normal in Canada. Working Canadians, from construction crews to office staff, are having to stop by food banks on their way home from work. In rural Canada, where food and fuel already cost more and jobs are often seasonal, families are being hit hardest. When will the Prime Minister admit his inflationary deficits are driving Canadians to food banks instead of grocery stores and change course?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, it's hard to listen to the party opposite talk about affordability when they voted against every single affordability measure this government has put forward. Whether it's the Canada Child Benefit, whether it's daycare, whether it's the school food program, which is not garbage, whether it's housing. Mr. Speaker, we're focused on making affordability for Canadians. We're cutting taxes for 22 million Canadians. We're cutting the GST for first-time homebuyers. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, We believe in supporting the most vulnerable in our society. They don't. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Mégantic-l'Érable-Lotbinière. Montreal is going hungry. That's what La Presse says. It's a gloomy picture of the state of finances of Canadian families after 10 years of Liberal rule. 600,000 people in Quebec depend on food banks, and all across Canada, it's over 2 million people per month using food banks. The trend accelerated after 10 years of inflationary Liberal spending. 33% are children. It's almost 2 times as many. Is the Prime Minister going to call on Canadians to make even more sacrifices? The Honourable Minister. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Food inflation is a global phenomenon which is much more complex than the simplistic slogans of the Conservatives. The big difference between them and us is that here on this side, we believe governments should provide support against inflation to help the middle and lower class families. That's what we're doing with our school food program, with dental care, with child care. And this is going to make a significant difference in the lives of Quebecers. The Conservatives, last week, one of them said it was garbage. That's the difference between Conservatives and Liberals. The honourable member for Mégantic-l'Érable-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, that government claims that they're supporting against inflation, but they're actually creating inflation. And that's why Food Banks Canada's final report for 2025 says that this has become the new normal in Canada, to go to the food bank under this Liberal government. 25% of users have jobs, 8% are seniors, 23% are dual-parent families. What's the Prime Minister waiting for? When's he going to stop the inflationary spending that's pushing more and more Canadians to the food banks? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This report clearly indicates that in order to meet the challenge, we need to strengthen our supports to families, and the Conservatives have opposed every step we've taken to support Canadian families. And in fact, the Conservative member called the program, the food school program, called it garbage. One Conservative member said that. And even though Food Banks is calling for us to make it permanent, which we will do, we will continue to support Canadian families. The honourable member for Pierre. Mr. Speaker, on Saturday, Donald Trump announced an additional 10% tariff for our forestry industry. That's in addition to the 10% we've already been paying since October 14th, and 35% countervailing duties that already existed. So that's 55% in tariffs and duties. It's clear Washington wants to crush our industry. We need a rescue plan, including financial support and wage supports to protect jobs. And we need that now. 55%, Mr. Speaker. What more is it going to take for this government to act? The Honourable Minister responsible for Canada-US trade. Mr. Speaker, obviously the government is still open to resuming our trade talks with the Americans, but our colleague referred to certain increases, potential increases to tariffs. I think we need to be careful. Before that's made official, we shouldn't jump to the conclusion that a certain amount of tariffs will be imposed. But we do fully share the members' concern about the future for workers and for the forestry industry. As we are also concerned about other industries, we will continue to support those workers and industries. The honourable member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, talk is one thing, action is another. The forestry was already at a breaking point before the announcement of new tariffs on Saturday. It's the hardest hit industry by Washington, and yet the financial aid announced by the Liberals in August has still not flowed. Almost 3 months later, there are still no wage supports to protect jobs. There's still no rescue plan. Canada has even cut back on measures to boost access to EI. Mr. Speaker, the crisis isn't over. It's only getting worse. When will the Liberals take action to help our forestry industry. The Honourable Minister of Industry. Mr. Speaker, we are activated. We're willing to work with my colleague, who I know has a number of forestry companies in his riding. Financial support is available through the banks, and it's guaranteed by BDC. The system is working, and some benefits have already been paid out. So we are in solutions mode. That said, we know there's more to be done. And we know we have to support the industry and the workers, and we will.
Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Under these Liberals, food prices have gone bananas. They're so bad that 1 in 5 food bank users works full-time. Even people working full-time cannot afford to eat in Canada. Now food banks are feeling the crunch, jammed with 2.2 million visits in a single month, and the Liberals think Canada is ripe for more inflationary spending, rubbing salt on the wounds. When will Liberals stop squashing workers with their inflationary spending and realize that it's time to reverse course?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Seniors.
Food Banks Canada has highlighted the importance of federal government action that is helping Canadians, like the National School Food Program and like the Canadian Dental Care Program. This is helping more than 2 million seniors. We're building an economy that works for everyone. Conservatives have a record of pushing the retirement age higher, cutting benefits, leaving seniors behind. Not again, Mr. Speaker. The Canadian public trusts us, not them. That's why, while they're voting against every measure for Canadians, we're empowering older Canadians and protecting not only their dignity, but their peace of mind.
The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, these Liberals love to talk about political food programs instead of affordable food. That was the question. Before liberal inflationary spending and hidden food taxes, Canadians could actually afford to feed themselves. Parents don't want the state parenting their children for them. Parents want the government to eliminate food taxes and stop inflationary spending so they can afford to feed their kids themselves. The Liberal fuel standard, food packaging tax, industrial carbon tax, inflationary spending. Speaker, when will it end?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
A few things that I think need to be cleared up here, Mr. Speaker. They talk about these imaginary taxes. I think the member needs to come clean. There is no tax on groceries. There never will be a tax on groceries. That is pretty clear. They talk about imaginary programs. I assure the member that he has voted against some very real programs, Mr. Speaker, very real programs for school food, for dental care, and many other things that are for the most vulnerable in society. The last thing, though, what is inflationary spending when it comes to supporting Canadians? Canadians want to know, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary East.
Every dollar this Prime Minister spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians through higher prices and food inflation. It took decades for food banks to have 1 million food bank users every month. It took the Liberals just 6 months to double that number. This Prime Minister said bet. He's going to double the deficit and make more than 2.2 million Canadians visit a food bank in a single month. When will these guys realize that inflationary deficits are driving up food costs and driving more Canadians into food banks?
Yeah, way to go, Jack.
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
You know, when the Prime Minister said that it's time for Canada to bet big, he meant bet big on Canadians. And that's something these guys don't understand. They refuse to invest in Canadians, Mr. Speaker. Today I announced that in Budget 2025, $75 million will go to building trades unions to make sure that kids and young people can get great jobs in the skilled trades. These are good paying jobs, Mr. Speaker. That's what it looks like to bet on Canadians. That's what it looks like to have the backs of Canadians.
Well done. The Honourable Member for Calgary East.
If programs like that actually worked and didn't feed bureaucracy, then 700,000 kids wouldn't be visiting a food bank every single month. And their Liberal deficits are what making the food go up in cost. That's why grocery inflation is up 4%. People who used to donate and that used to volunteer at food banks are now standing in line for food at those food banks. Why won't these Liberals stop feeding their egos, stop feeding their bloated bureaucracy, so Canadians can finally afford to feed themselves?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
So which is it, Mr. Speaker? Speaker, they're either about empowering Canadians through good-paying jobs or empowering Canadians through the kinds of programs like the school food program. We believe in both, Mr. Speaker, because we're betting on Canadians. We're betting on both their resiliency and their ability to get those great-paying jobs as we create those projects across the country. This member opposite, Mr. Speaker, he doesn't want to invest in Canadians either to support them now or to help them have better futures. So which is it? Which is it that he's asking for? To cut services for Canadians or invest in them? We're going to do both. We're going to make sure Canadians have.
The honourable member for Saskatoon University.
Hardworking Canadians spend all day at work, and on the way home, they are not stopping at grocery stores. It's food banks. For millions of working Canadians, they have to go to the food banks because they can't afford the hidden Liberal food taxes like the industrial carbon tax and the food packaging tax. Food Banks Canada reports a record-smashing 2.2 million visits in a single month. And donations, well, they're down because Canadians are broke. When will these out-of-touch Liberals admit to driving up the cost of food and driving Canadians to the food bank?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Northern.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. After 10 years of Conservative MPs coming to Ottawa, collectively with 14 of them coming, that's 140 years. And that's the first question we got from a Saskatchewan perspective, Mr. Speaker. In my riding, Saskatchewan is finally here on the government side. We're going to address housing, Mr. Speaker. We're going to address the cost of living. And I'm glad finally the Conservatives from Saskatchewan finally woke up.
The Honourable Member for Avalon.
Mr. Speaker, constituents of my riding of Avalon and the good people of Newfoundland and Labrador were shocked to hear the Conservative member of Central Newfoundland say that the Healthy Meals program, which feeds 4,100, yes, 4,100 or more kids at schools in our province, was garbage. In reality, hundreds of thousands of additional children are being fed at schools across Canada thanks to this government. But I guess it is easier to say you're going to cut a program if you try to make yourself believe that it doesn't exist. Can the Secretary of State please inform my constituents how the National Food
The Honourable Secretary of State for Children and Youth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague from Avalon for his question. In fact, Sarah from Central Newfoundland reached out to tell me about the National School Food Program at their school after her members' comments last week. And I quote, she said, "It's wonderful. More students are getting healthy lunches." And the lunch lady went from part-time to full-time. Plus, they hired 2 nans as part-time. Employment in his area. Mr. Speaker, there are countless examples like this across Canada of kids getting meals thanks to the National School Food Program. We will always be there for Canadian families.
The Honourable Member for Fort McMurray, Cold Lake.
Children are going hungry in Canada due to Liberal mismanagement. Every dollar this Liberal Prime Minister spends comes out of the pockets of Canadian families through higher prices and food inflation. 1/3 of Canadian children now live in a food-insecure household. Food Banks Canada reports record-breaking food bank use with 2.2 million visits in a single month, and over 700,000 of those visits are children. When will the Liberals realize that their inflationary deficits are driving up the cost of food banks and driving Canadian children to the food bank?
The Honourable Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we are committed to growing the strongest economy in the G7 and protecting and strengthening the supports that help Canadian families. The report that is being highlighted here, again, I would say that the relief that families get through the school food program, dental care, childcare, these are all things that report cites as critical to addressing the challenges that Canadians are facing right now. This government will always stand with Canadian families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Fort McMurray, Cold Lake.
If a single one of those projects and programs actually worked, there wouldn't be 700,000 children waiting in food bank lines every single month. This is not okay. And yet somehow the Liberals have normalized this. 9 out of 10 kids aren't even fed by the school food program, Mr. Speaker. When will the Liberals realize their inflationary deficits and hidden food taxes are making food more expensive and driving Canadian children to food banks?
The Honourable Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No child in this country should go to school hungry. This is why our government brought forward the National School Food Program, and that is why this new government has committed to making this program permanent and introducing legislation to do so, as well as the funding necessary to ensure this program continues in perpetuity. This is an essential piece of tackling the challenges that Canadian families are facing. We are proud of this program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Battleford, Lloydminster, Meadow Lake.
Mr. Speaker, every dollar the Prime Minister spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians through higher prices and food inflation. Food Banks Canada is reporting 2.2 million visits in a single month. This is double what it was just 6 years ago. Even more alarming, 1 in 3 of those visits is by a child. Their CEO says parents are stopping in at the food bank on the way home from work, not the grocery store. When will this Prime Minister finally admit his inflationary spending and deficits are driving parents to the food banks?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, years ago, Food Secure Canada did an analysis of all the issues in the food system. Do you know what issue was the most popular among Canadians? Feeding kids. It's instinctual for any parent, but the desire to feed kids extends almost universally to all Canadians, except when it comes to the Conservatives. They've taken the most unpopular position. They actually oppose a national school food program. Their usual excuse is to claim that there's no food in the food program, but last week they actually had the gall to call the food program garbage. Who does that? Who says that, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Member for Battleford, Lloydminster, Meadow Lake.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if these programs actually fed the children that the Liberals are claiming they feed, there wouldn't be 750,000 plus children lined up at the food banks every month. Mr. Speaker, it's the hidden taxes like the fuel standard, the food packaging tax, the industrial carbon tax, and rising inflation that are making it harder for families at the grocery checkout. Grocery prices are up 4% overall, with ground beef up 17%, coffee up 28%, soup is up 9%. And those numbers, Mr. Speaker, translate to record numbers of Canadians turning to the food banks to feed their families. When will this Prime
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, while our government invests in feeding 400,000 more kids healthy food in schools, the Conservatives call that garbage. While our government works to expedite major infrastructure projects creating tens of thousands of jobs, the Conservative leader calls them pathetic. While our government gives law enforcement the tools they need to keep our communities safe, the Conservative leader calls the RCMP despicable. The pattern is clear. The Conservatives will disparage people, projects, and programs that help Canadians while we continue to deliver for them.
The Honourable Member for King Vaughan.
Built this country and taught us the value of hard work while managing our budgets are having to line up at the food bank. Food Banks Canada reports that almost 10% of food bank users are seniors, up 22% from 2019. This Liberal government's reckless spending has driven up prices and left our seniors behind. When will this Liberal government respect our seniors and stop the inflationary spending so that they can live their retirement years in dignity?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Seniors.
This government is the only party in this House that can be trusted to have seniors' backs. We returned the age of retirement to 65 when those folks wanted to push it up to 67. Through this government's actions, we are ensuring that Canadian seniors have access to one of the largest social programs in the country, and that is the Old Age Security and Guaranteed Income Supplement. Through that, we are ensuring, Mr. Speaker, that folks have up to $1,086 per month for the most financially vulnerable seniors. It is things like this that ensure seniors have...
The honourable member for Markham Unionville.
Mr. Speaker, every dollar the Prime Minister spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians through higher prices and through food inflation. Monthly visits to food banks have doubled since 2019, with 2.2 million visits per month. Nearly 10% of food bank users are now seniors. This is up 22%. This reliance on food banks has to become an ongoing necessity to survive. Mr. Speaker, when will the Liberals realize that their inflationary deficits are driving up the cost of food and driving Canadians to the food bank?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Speaker, I think we've covered quite a bit in this question period, but let me remind the opposition that today I was with the SEIU, who represents personal support workers across this country. These incredible, hardworking people who support our family members, our seniors every day. Under Budget 2025, it proposes that they will receive a tax credit, a non-refundable tax credit worth $1,100 a year. Mr. Speaker, the union fought for this. They asked for this. Promise made, promise kept, Mr. Speaker. And I'll end with this. This is money in the pockets of these workers. I sure hope they're going to support the budget.
The honourable member for Richmond, North Athabasca. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this morning, a baby abandoned in a bus shelter died. It's undescribably sad, and I'm sure that all of my colleagues here in this House join me in hoping that that baby rests in peace. How much must somebody suffer to come to that situation? People are suffering. People are having a hard time getting housing. People are having a hard time getting food. People are losing their jobs. Canadians are suffering, Mr. Speaker. Are the Liberals aware of the consequences of their poor management? The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think I speak on behalf of all colleagues when we send our sympathy to this tragedy, which has affected all of Quebec right now, and we send our sympathy to the family. The Honourable Member for Richmond, North Athabasca. Mr. Speaker, these are facts. This child had a family, and we need to fight, Mr. Speaker. We are talking about our people. We're talking about people in my riding of Richmond, North Athabasca.
For 6
Use
minutes,
of the food bank has gone up. People created an organization
of the Privy Council. You oversaw compliance of the Conflict of Interest Act.
Our kids.
Would you say that the existing divestiture provisions, including the use of blind trusts, actually prevent conflicts of interest, or in practice, do they or can they fall short?
I think this is probably one of the central questions the committee will want to come to a view on. If you'll just permit me, I saw the conflict of interest regime as one tool in a broader toolbox about democratic governance, and there are a number of tools designed to detect and deter inappropriate points of leverage on our decision makers and keep the trust of Canadians. So very briefly, the Lobbying Act, the rules around campaign donations, the Foreign Agent Registry, security clearances, the criminal code provisions. This is all helped by a beneficial ownership registry, a lobbyist registry, and transparency around government contracting and contribution agreements. Parliament created the commissioner model, and it provided for a range of remedies at the discretion of the commissioner, and one of them is a trust arrangement. So I think it's up to you to judge whether it falls short or not. I would keep it in the toolbox.
Would you say that it's effective for people who report to the Prime Minister to be the ones ensuring that the Prime Minister that they report to is not in violation of the Act?
Well, it's ultimately up to the Commissioner to make rulings on that.
To make rulings on whether or not the people who report to the Prime Minister should, for example, administer a blind trust?
No, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the arrangements that any Prime Minister or Minister or office holder would make would be discussed with the Commissioner, and the Commissioner would exercise an opinion on whether they're adequate or not, can request changes and has remedies available to him or her.
Based on your experience, do you think that that works?
I think that it's going to be tricky when people come into a background, extensive background in the private sector. People come into Parliament, as you know, from many, many different backgrounds, and we want, I think one of the other purposes is to ensure broad and inclusive participation in public office. I would be very careful considering mandatory divestitures because it may end up as a deterrent to people with a private sector background coming into politics. And my view is that we need more people with private sector backgrounds in politics, not fewer.
I guess the issue is that it's a question of public confidence, Canadians being able to trust that the system that's in place is adequately ensuring that there is no conflict of interest. And in the case of an individual entering office, being elected, serving as Prime Minister, having significant investments, and those investments going into the blind trust, and the Ethics Commissioner telling us that there's not any really a lot of churn of those investments, they know what's in there. And then the conflict of interest screen is administered by direct reports to the Prime Minister. And the perception can be and is that there's a conflict, and that a Prime Minister is continuing to take decisions that further their own financial interest. And there's no reporting to the public on when a conflict of interest screen has been triggered and if it's ever been triggered. And so the higher imperative, I would say, or the leading imperative is that we ensure that Canadians have confidence in public office holders and public institutions, and they don't seem to have that. Would you care to reflect on your time as clerk of the Privy Council? You served a Prime Minister who was found to have broken the act that we're studying, and twice found guilty of breaking that law. 10 different instances, and that's based on the regime as it currently exists. You must have some suggestions on improvements so that we can avoid a situation where we find a Prime Minister who is repeatedly breaking this law.
You have a minute, Mr. Warnick. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, I think we should discuss this further because the law is built on language which includes perceived conflict of interest. And I think that's always going to be a challenge because perceived conflict of interest can be very subjective. And somebody's going to have to exercise judgment about what is a perceived conflict and what are the appropriate remedies. Certainly you can change the act to add other provisions, more sanctions, and so on. But I think the problematic part of enforcing the act is that somebody's got to exercise judgment and discretion about perceived conflicts of interest.
In the case of Mr. Trudeau, though, it wasn't a perception; it was that he actually broke the law, and it would seem that.
I mean, sorry, but you're conflating broke the law with an infraction on a perceived conflict of interest. There are many ways to break the law. Yeah, of course. But there are different remedies.
You should should do exercises. That's important to our good health. And friends, tomorrow we are going to be visiting with a fisherman who will tell us about his very enjoyable hobby. Now, I would like to see you all through our magic mirror. Romper, bumper, stomper, boo, tell me, do. Magic mirror, please tell me today, did all of my friends have fun at play? I see all of my friends in Alberta. It's nice to see you. And I see Dan and Vivian. I see Marlon and Mona. I see Catherine and Harley. I see Anne and Elizabeth and Jane. I see Bert and Nicole, and I see you too. I hope to see you tomorrow, right here in Romper Room.
Ding dong, knock knock, hey daddy do. Bing bong, tick tock, bebop boom.
Kick off your weekend with exciting CFL action when the Edmonton Eskimos tackle the BC Lions in Vancouver. Tomorrow night at 10:30 on CFTO TV.